I phoned my parents from the hostel. I had a million questions for my mother. Did she remember the street name of the apartment we had moved to after the first month? Where was the cafe where we had had breakfast every morning? Why had we ended up in Sevilla?
See that? They just got the tail off.
She didn't remember any names. She told me she was trying to write a novel, a murder mystery. She had wanted to learn about a neoconservative brotherhood called Agnus Dei, the Lamb of God, which reportedly controlled much of life in Spain. I asked if she had finished writing the book. No, she said. I threw it out a long time ago.
They just got the tail off.
My father got on the line, and I told both of them about the wild boar hunters Alex and I had seen on the way down to Sevilla. Then I said goodbye.
What's
Et ça, c'est le cœur.
Ah oui. Ah, voilà. Le cœur.
Et elle est là, le son.
Trying to tell Alex about Semana Santa was like trying to describe a nightmare, which just doesn't sound frightening when it's retold.
Ah, mais. Bon. Merci.
From Palm Sunday to Good Friday, the city's streets are haunted by hooded Nazarenos, leading floats like the one for the Virgin de Triana, lit up by hundreds of candles. Every church and chapel has its own float and scheduled procession, and each procession follows a different course, or paso, through Sevilla's alleyways. The floats are carried by secret fraternities, which are associated with the different neighborhoods and churches. Children would ask the Nazarenos for wax droppings, collecting them on bits of paper. I was afraid to ask, but I eventually did, and my sister glued the pieces of paper covered with wax into her journal. I learned to read in Spain. My mother home taught my sister and me for that year. It worried my mother that I hadn't learned sooner, and I remember her pointing to signs and billboards in London and asking me if I didn't want to know what this or that said. Then we got to Spain, and none of us knew what anything said. So I learned to read English as my mother struggled with Spanish. In the afternoons, we would do our schoolwork, and then at night, in bed, my sister would read aloud her school books. To Kill a Mockingbird, An Episode of Sparrows, Jane Eyre. I would fall asleep to her reading, and later I would wonder if I had dreamed the weird old lady in Jane Eyre's attic, or Boo Radley's back porch at night. I thought of the tapas bar where my mother, sister, and I used to spend our evenings. I would get té con leche or strawberry milk, while my mother drank what she could afford, usually vino rioja. We ate tapas of spinach with chickpeas, squid with garlic, or oxtail and tomato sauce. We didn't have a lot of money, so my mother was always watching what we spent. She kept all our cash in a money belt, which she would only open when no one was looking. I remember walking through the crowded outdoor markets with exotic fruits like cherry moyas and cages full of small yellow and green birds. The man selling them would snap their necks between his thumb and forefinger when someone bought one. My mother never let me out of her sight. Alex and I looked for the apartment my mother had moved to after the first month. It overlooked a triangular plaza. I tried describing the place to some people on the street, but all I could remember was that the square was next to a cloistered convent, and that the nuns sold sweets from behind a wooden turnstile, so you couldn't see them. Someone suggested we try the Plaza de San Leandro. The name wasn't familiar, but we followed their directions. I immediately recognized the little grocery store on the southwest side, even the shade of the tree at midday, the goose on top of the fountain, and the windowless wall of the convent on the north side. I was sad to see that the plaza's carboneria was gone. I used to watch the man selling lumps of coal from our window. I was afraid of him. He was covered in coal dust and would move around the piles of coal muttering to himself. He would weigh out chunks of coal with a primitive scale before wrapping them in newspaper. Now I looked up at our old apartment windows. The place looked abandoned. I could see light coming through the ceiling where the roof had caved in, and there were pigeons roosting inside. There was graffiti on the walls. I felt old. Our apartment had a small balcony where my mother would sit out in the sun, writing. The balcony faced the convent, and my sister and I would watch the barred windows, hoping to catch a glimpse of the nuns. We wondered what they did, if they spoke to each other, if they were ever allowed to see their families. I pointed the apartment out to Alex and told her about the nuns and how no one was allowed to see them. We put our money in the turnstile and rang the bell. I recently learned that people used to put unwanted babies in these things, so the nuns would take care of them and raise them. The go-around swung back almost automatically with the candy. It was sickeningly sweet, I think made from egg yolks and sugar. Neither of us felt like eating it. We left the plaza not knowing what to do next.